Hello, welcome back to the OSW project with part 4 of the series. In the previous parts I showed you how I strengthened my Obutto cockpit to make it cope with the much higher forces of this OSW direct drive wheel, and also how I modified all my wheel rims to make sure they wouldn't be shaken apart by this force feedback monster. But I still had to do something with this Thrustmaster F1 rim. I just couldn't see a way how the plastic would hold up to the forces. So I decided to make a completely new rim and just reuse the electronics. I know, not particularly beautiful, but the plan was to reuse as much of the wiring as possible. As for the design for the new wheel rim, I decided to do it proper and make it from scratch in CAD software. Then I had the front and back plates water cut from aluminium sheet, 5mm for the front and 2mm for the back plate, with 20mm in between them. I have used this method of gluing carbon fiber sheet on aluminium plates with epoxy now for the third and probably the last time. It's just really not worth the hassle, and to be honest, carbon fiber vinyl just looks as good. For the handles I wanted to do something different. My friend Michael, who was working on his own wheel rim project at the same time, he had the idea of using wood, and I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. After some research I picked two exotic woods, Bubinga and Red Heart. The Bubinga was actually a bit too hard for my tools and my woodworking skills, so I ended up with the Red Heart wood. As the name implies, it has a very nice red color, although that red color fades very quickly in sunlight and you can't really do anything about it. Nevertheless, it was actually quite nice to work with, and generally I have to say that working with wood was a really nice experience. The wood handles would be made of 2 parts per side, bolted together through the front plate. As I didn't want there to be any holes on the front side, the plan was to use wood insert nuts. So wood insert nuts in the front parts and countersunk holes in the back parts. You still need to drill them from the correct side though. But luckily, with a bit of wood glue and these wood dowels, which happen to have exactly the correct size, the repair was easily done. Quite incredibly, everything fit together pretty well. I was super happy with the result. They turned out much nicer than I thought they would. Now I had to decide which finish I wanted to use. My first idea was this boat lacquer. It should be very resistant and also block UV light, which should decelerate the color fading a little bit. Unfortunately, for several reasons, this didn't work at all for me. I probably used layers too thick and also the wrong lacquer thinner. and hence it dried for ages and still didn't cure. My second idea was shellac. Although it's probably not as durable as other finishes, it's very easily applicable and also repairable, non-toxic, and has a couple of other advantages. A couple of layers with a brush, a bit of hand sanding in between, and the last layers with French polish technique. A proper F1 rim needs pedal shifters, right? The original Thrustmaster pedal shifters felt quite well after I modified them with magnets. So I just took the whole unit from the old rim and adapted it to make it fit on a new one. A totally proper F1 rim also needs clutch pedals. I still had this broken Simracing SRW S1 wheel laying around. The electronics didn't work anymore, but it had these two analog pedals, which should make some pretty good clutch pedals. Et voila! Even with a mechanical bite point adjustment screw. Now if only iRacing had more standing starts. Another silly idea I had was these thumb encoders. Since I could only mount them behind the front plate, I was kinda limited as to how far they would protrude and how well they would be operable from the other side. I had ordered these 3D printed knobs from 3D Wrap, but in my case they didn't work too well because the gaps between the teeth were too deep and too big. So again, my DIY brain went a bit crazy and thought of ways to modify them. I designed the labels in GIMP, printed them on vinyl, and to make them a bit more glossy and also to protect them from scratches, I applied a transparent self-adhesive tape. order to hide the mess I made inside, at least from a top view, I made a little top cover from aluminium sheet and covered it with carbon fiber vinyl. I glued the thumb encoders in place on the front plate, and afterwards I put some hot glue into the wood handles and put everything together very quickly. Finally, some epoxy to glue the top cover on the front plate. Only on the front plate, of course. And that's that. It's done. Finally. It took so long. I mean, this video compressed all of this into a couple of minutes, but in reality it took me about 9 months or so. So a huge project. But on the other hand, it turned out really nicely and I'm super happy. Certainly the best wheel mod project that I've ever made, by a long shot. A couple of mistakes here and there, but on the other hand I've learned a lot. As I have mentioned earlier, my friend and teammate Michael had worked on his wheel project simultaneously, and that was cool because we pushed each other, gave each other ideas and helped here and there, and as you can see, his wheel is a real masterpiece. Really beautiful. So the only thing that's really left is start the engine and finally turn some laps.